Welcome our speaker, Dr. Edward L. Vine. Dr. Vine is an emeritus staff scientist from Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory, which is one of several national laboratories affiliated with the University of California. His research focuses on the evaluation of energy efficiency policies. He has a PhD from UC Davis in ecology, but with a focus on energy efficiency and energy policy analysis. He's the author of numerous publications and 3 books. And I think in what is a first for UC Center Sacramento, he is also the joint holder of a Nobel Prize. He shared with the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, 2007 Nobel Peace Prize, along with Al Gore for their work on climate change. So his topic today will revolve about evaluation of energy policies. In our academic coursework here for the students, we often emphasize a lot of the underpinnings of evaluation, and we emphasize how important it really is for those of us interested in whether public policies really work to garner the right kinds of empirical information to make decisions about what works and what doesn't, so we can know what to implement going forward. So, pleasure to have Dr. Vine here to talk to us more about this with respect to energy. Dr. Vine.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Can everyone hear me in the back? That's the most important. Front. There's a lot of slides in here. I'm going to go through it very quickly, and you can follow up with me afterwards with an email address, or you can contact me afterwards. It's a real pleasure to be here. I was an undergraduate at Middlebury College in Vermont. A graduate student down the road in Davis, and my background is always in energy efficiency, and I really came to evaluation to show people that energy efficiency is real. There's a lot of skepticism, and for most looking at the young faces here, you may not know that, but when we were thinking about electricity use and consumption, people said, well, where can we build our next power plant? And whether it's oil or gas or coal or nuclear. And I focused on the demand side. Do we really need that many power plants to provide that amount of energy? And so I've always looked at the demand side and energy efficiency. And so the focus will be on that today. My area has always been in the buildings. I'm also more on the behavioral side rather than technology side, so you won't hear me talk about new technologies in general. What else? Yeah, that's sort of the context. So in terms of questions, there is a period at the end of my talk where we can try to answer your questions. So if you can hold those till then, that would be great. Here's the outline of my talk. Not everyone knows. I'm sure there's some people probably evaluation specialists here, but there are others who've never heard of evaluation, want to learn about evaluation. It's a language. I'm sure you're in all different disciplines, and one language for discipline is different than another. So I want to make sure in the beginning people understand what I mean when I talk about evaluation. And then we've learned a lot of lessons about evaluation. I'm going to give you some key lessons learned. And then where are we headed in evaluation? Next step. And you may have heard about some of this before. And then briefly, since we're all in California, I'm not going to give you the whole history of evaluation in California, but just a few examples of what's been going on. And then where I've been spending my time in the last few years is developing evaluation in Asia. And I think Asia is sort of the action place now, particularly if you're interested in climate change and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So from an overview of evaluation, I'm going to focus on what are the key evaluation questions people ask. What do we mean by impact evaluation? What do we mean by process evaluation? A very important aspect is what we call closing the loop. This gets involved when we're talking to stakeholders, policymakers. How do they learn about what's going on in terms of evaluation? And keep in mind, this is relevant for all energy sources, here. I saw a poster earlier on solar energy and wind energy. All and also in terms of disciplines, whether it's healthcare, education, evaluation has a critical role to play in learning what works and how can we improve what we're doing. So key evaluation questions is what is evaluation? Why do we evaluate? What is the focus of evaluation? When do we evaluate? And who are the key stakeholders? So what is evaluation? To me, evaluation is objective, and I sort of, you may not be able to see the coloring here, but an objective process of understanding how a policy or program was implemented, and then what the effects are of that program or policy, who is it benefiting, for whom, and then why. So all the entities are sort of the framework for doing an evaluation. And then the hope is not just doing an evaluation, but it will result in more effective policies and programs. So why do we evaluate, particularly in the energy world? Reduce uncertainty, assess impacts, improve program design, as I mentioned, and then in California, we finalize utility incentive savings. California, not surprisingly, is different than a lot of the other states. So there is not a national evaluation construct going on. Each state in the energy world has their own evaluation framework, stakeholders, community. There's a lot of overlap, but each state really doesn't follow. And in fact, when they say this happens in California, they'll say, well, we want to do something different. In other states, they do want to follow. And we're going to go each of these aspects, but these are the main areas of why. And then the focus of evaluation, it's important to look at this starting from measures in the green. So a lighting measure, that's what we need. You have put in new energy efficient lighting, LEDs, for example, instead of incandescent lighting. And then there are projects that get those measures in place. And a project might be here in this room. We're going to replace all the old lighting with new lighting. That would be a project. And then programs, MUD, Sacramento Municipal Utilities District has an energy efficiency program, say in the residential sector. That would be one where they're, again, changing lighting in households. A portfolio, if you use MUD as an example, since it's their territory, they have a number of different programs, residential area, commercial area, industrial area, transportation area. And then policy. MUD, from their board, issues policies. Sometimes they reflect what the governor of California has issued. So let's reduce energy use by 20% by 2020, for example, would be one policy. Evaluation can look at each of these. I, over the years, have focused mainly on programs as well as policy. So when do we evaluate? What we try to do is make sure people evaluate, or at least start the evaluation process as early as possible. In the old days, people would wait till the program has been completed and then says, okay, let's do an evaluation. Well, that is not a very effective or efficient way of using your resources and doing evaluation. Plus, you lose a lot of information. So we try to provide feedback very early for the policy and program context in developing the rationale, the objectives, how it gets appraised or evaluated, appraisal, monitoring, evaluation, and then feedback. And this is a continual loop. The color scheme, for those who are interested, ex ante, before a program is implemented, you need to have a rationale, a design on why are we doing this program, what are we trying to achieve. The purple is more of the evaluation, what we call ex post. The program is actually being implemented. We do process evaluation, impact evaluation, economic. And I'm going to focus on these two in a second. Who are the key stakeholders? Well, there are many. It's not just one stakeholder. There are program implementers, funders, the regulators. In California particularly, California Public Utilities Commission that regulates the investor-owned utilities has been a very active player in the evaluation field, planners, policymakers, elected and appointed officials, and special interests, say the Natural Resource Defense Council. I can go on. I'll stop there. That's just one. Turn, if you're involved in people who are interested in ratepayers and making sure ratepayers don't get overcharged, they're interested in this as well. So what do we mean by impact evaluation? Let's get there. This is estimating the change in energy use. Could also be greenhouse gas emissions or the market share for efficient projects, and what is the change over time due to these programs or policies. And so what do we look at from an impact evaluation? What are we focusing on? What are the energy, the gross, what we call energy and demand savings from time 1 to time 2. We're also interested in net energy and demand savings to reduce free riders and spillover. And I may mention this later. So a free rider is somebody who's going to do something even without the program. So suppose SMUD offers a $50 rebate for doing a home energy upgrade for your home. Well, you were going to do it anyway, but you're going to get the $50. Okay, you're a free rider. Spillover, in contrast, is you do a home energy upgrade, and your neighbor hears about it and decides to do it outside of the program. They don't participate in the program, so it gets into fine detail. I'm not going to go too much farther than that, but I will mention this later in an example. Here's where the dotted line is what we call the baseline. There's no policy or program going on. And then a policy is launched here in the beginning, and we're looking at energy savings over time, or if you're interested in market share, what percent, you go to Home Depot, what percent of their products, say air conditioners, are energy efficient. So you can see over time with a particular program or policy, we expect more. So here there might be education and labeling, there might be rebates, and then eventually we have codes. Codes are like building codes is what we often refer to. We also have standards, appliance standards. So if you buy an air conditioner, in many places they have to sell to a certain energy efficient standard. So these are the types of things that we look at. And then we start measuring, that's the dotted vertical line, and then we look at the gross policy impact, which I mentioned before, the gross savings, and then we look at the net impact, taking away what's going to happen anyway, what we call natural change, So this is the kind of things we're looking at in terms of impacts. Now, as I mentioned, often, particularly in California, we focus on electricity and natural gas. Those are the two main sources when we're looking, particularly in buildings. The time period, well, sometimes you do it from year 1 to year 2. So this is 2017 program, started in 2016. What's the change from 1 year to another? In California, and you've seen one of the posters looking at peak demand. Summertime is really critical in California. That's when everyone starts their air conditioners, right? So we're really interested in that summer period or season. Other places around the state, around the United States, they're interested in the winter time, the winter peak, when they have their heating in Montana, for example. Weekly, daily, hourly, so the time increments are getting finer and finer, and some of the utilities and some of the programs are looking at those time units. There's increasing interest in multiple benefits, something that I've been working on for a number of years. We also call it non-energy impacts or non-energy benefits and costs. I've emphasized the energy savings, but there are changes that are occurring in terms of employment, jobs, energy efficiency programs, employ a number of people, indoor and outdoor air quality. People are interested in the health aspects, particularly asthma, as well as particulates, and you can try to attribute some of these impacts and savings or reductions due to energy savings programs, health, of course, and climate change. So when I first started, people weren't talking about climate change, but now it's sort of the a very important driver for affecting what I've been doing, energy efficiency, as well as other programs. A lot of data is collected in terms of evaluation. Energy usage, I've just mentioned. Load shade data. In the summer, right, you have a high peak, a lot of energy use. We want to know how much energy is being used and saved during the season or that day. Hours of operation. You can imagine, compare colleges and universities where you all come from during the school year versus the non-school year, summer when they're shut down. That obviously affects how much energy is being used in these buildings, and you can do that for hospitals and restaurants and so on. The physical characteristics, how big are these buildings, where are they located, what kind of equipment are in there. Other physical variables, temperature. You often normalize energy consumption by heating and cooling degree days. So when we compare energy savings, we want to make sure it's not just because it's a cooler day or a hotter day. And then occupancy. Again, as I mentioned, building occupancy changes from season to season and even during the day. After 5 o'clock today in Sacramento, there are going to be a lot less people in those buildings than during the workday. We take advantage of that. We have methods, excuse me, to collect this data as well as analyze it. Some are engineers, so we have a very diverse group of people working in evaluation. They're not all sociologists, for example, or political scientists. We have those involved. We have architects, we have engineers, and so on. They're all involved in looking, analyzing the building data, developing computer models, building models for looking at energy use, putting in meters to track and record energy use for particular equipment, and then doing all these, either combining two or more. That's the kind of evaluation we're looking for. So obviously, you can imagine impact evaluation really takes more people's attention than when we talk about process evaluation. Why? Particularly when you go to your stakeholders, whether it's in Sacramento or in Washington, D.C., the first question they ask is, well, how much has been saved? Give me a number, period. That's all they're interested in. That's the impact. Just tell me, did you save 5%, 10%, 20%? But process evaluation is just as critical, and for me, well, maybe even more critical, because it focuses on how a program is implementing and operating. And in order to do that, it identifies procedures and program logic, describes how it operates, the services delivered, and the functions, the roles and responsibilities of the people implementing the program. Again, if we go back to SMUD, there's program managers. They have to report to advisory committees, and then they hire people to do this work. So there are a lot of people involved in implementing these programs, and you need to assess the reasons for success or the problems. And then through the process of evaluation, it results in recommendations to improve program effectiveness and efficiency. And that's really critical. That's what we want to get out of this whole enterprise, not just do it, but to learn from it so we get better programs. He is trying not to optimize, but to improve all these programs. So then when you look at the impacts again, you're going to get more, well, better, not better, greater impacts. Okay, and as well as looking at multiple benefits as well. So these evaluations provide a systematic way to learn from program experience, both within a particular program over time and across programs being fielded simultaneously or considered for the future. And they provide assurance for interested parties that programs are being implemented effectively and modified or refined as necessary. So I won't spend too much time on the current political atmosphere that we're currently facing today. But there are people who are still going back to what I was confronting in the early 80s. In particular, why are we putting money into energy efficiency, wind, solar, or shouldn't we be doing something else? So this is what we wanted to do, provide assurance to people who are questioning it that, yes, these are valuable resources. So the focus explains why the program succeeds or fails. Not all programs work. There are failures. What are the barriers to participation? SMUD offers a program. It doesn't mean every household in the SMUD territory is going to be participating. Sometimes things don't work out as well as anticipated. There are unanticipated responses. And then looking at improving program operations. And here's just this process that we use in evaluation, determining the purpose, engaging stakeholders in the beginning, developing a theory of change. I'll get to this in a sec. Identifying questions. What is the evidence that is required? Securing the budget, the resources to do the evaluation, conducting evaluation, sharing the data. So again, you can use the same step for whatever field you're working on. This works not just energy efficiency, but you're looking at health, crime, and so on. Here is the theory of change that we sort of required all evaluators to use. This is used in the educational world and other areas where evaluation is being used. What are your inputs? What are the activities? What do you expect as an output? And then the longer term, the outcome and the impact. You know, when a program gets implemented, right away you might have some outputs. You know, how many people were trained at this workshop, for example. Later, it takes much longer to say, well, were there any impacts? Did people save energy by coming to a workshop? These are sort of the inputs to each of these steps, but I won't spend too much time on that. And then closing the loop, ensuring that evaluation results are useful and used by very program stakeholders. So the biggest problem with evaluation studies is you just don't want to do your study and then put it in a filing cabinet. There are still filing cabinets these days, but putting it away and nobody hears about it or sees or reads it. So we want to make sure they're useful and they're used by program stakeholders. And again, we do this at the feedback when we're provided, but they're also involved in some of these steps as well. In California, we have a number of activities going on where these studies, impact study, process study, goes into some of the tools that the California Public Utility Commission does for databases and calculators to build their portfolio programs. So we've really integrated this, so it's very useful. And then from these tools, then they develop potential goals, trying to meet, say, what Governor Brown is saying. If you want to save 40% energy, how does all this fit into the potential goal study? And then from there, they develop a portfolio for the investor-owned utilities on what kind of programs they're going to be offering, and then how are they going to procure energy outside of this as well. So fortunately in California, they've been thinking about this for a while, but this is a good schematic on how this information is being used. In Thailand, this is the Electricity Generating Authority of Thailand, they're also using, so this is being used, but I thought these bullets were pretty good. They disseminate their results from evaluations through informal meetings, oral briefings, and media presentations. So it's just not a report saying, go read the 200-page report. Write a final report with a brief and non-technical executive summary. Circulate results to other researchers and people interested in the issue. Create and distribute a monthly tracking report, and then involve third parties, professional organizations to help disseminate results. You know, one person can't do it all, so you need to really create a network to have people send the message out. So that's sort of my intro. I'm hoping you understand sort of what I've been doing and others as well. There are other people, it's just not me. What have we learned? First, to do a good evaluation, you need an experienced evaluation. You just can't hire anybody. It seems very common sense, but when there are requests for proposals, there's a whole diverse group of people who propose. And so if you're interested in evaluation and trying to think of an evaluation from one of your programs or policies, we've learned that even though, well, it's worth getting an experience evaluation team. Again, funding, everyone says, well, how expensive is it? You need sufficient time and resources to do good evaluations. Not necessarily cheap, and you don't want it cheap. So you need that. You need time to engage evaluators. You need time to get commitment from the people who are doing or who want the evaluation. So maybe the legislator might be a utility, but you need to work with them and make sure you have enough time rather than go ahead and do the evaluation right away. You need a helpful and responsive client at the outset, for example, PG&E, SMUD, California Energy Commission. You need to use multiple evaluation methods. I mentioned that before. And you need this theory of change, very critical. That's what we're doing. You've got to have that at the beginning. Emphasize quality assurance and good management practices. We often have peer review teams, so they are actually looking at your draft deliverables, making sure things are working according to plan. Focus on how results will be used, okay? And I think I've talked enough about that one. So what about evaluation in California today? Well, there's a long history of evaluation in California, as I mentioned. It started really in the mid-70s. It has been led by the California Public Utilities Commission, and it is, as I mentioned earlier, a leader among the states. And there's a strong commitment to evaluation in the years ahead. It used to be 1 year evaluation cycle, and then they have to do it another again. 2 years and 3. Now it's a 10-year rolling. The state is committed to doing an evaluation for 10 years. They're different, not one evaluation for 10 years, but a series of evaluations. A very strong commitment saying, yeah, evaluation is important for us, credibility, and so on. The process, very briefly, since I've been involved in all this, and none of you probably have, or maybe a few of you, but we have guidance from the PUC. Here are the goals for saving for the investor-owned utilities. They come up with their applications, their savings estimates. They then go out and implement their programs. And then the PUC looks and conducts EM&V for evaluated savings, which then go, and also a review process for their expansion before what they're engineering. So this is basically similar to what I mentioned before, the cycle that goes on, that the PUC is committed, the utilities are involved in. So when you hear about energy programs, particularly with the big four investor-owned, but the municipal utilities have been doing a great job. SMUD in particular has been a leader among the municipal utilities. The thing that's been driving also, because there are drivers, when you think of all the fields you're in, what are the key drivers? In California, for the utilities, it's energy savings and performance. So one step back, why are utilities trying to save energy when they get paid by how much they sell? Seems a disconnect, right? Why are they leaders? They should be, the more they sell, the more money they make, right? But here we're saying don't sell as much. We want you to save. So it's another hour conversation here, but the utilities wanted incentives. We had one earlier incentive mechanism that was replaced by another in 2013 that essentially set out clear performance goals, understanding of how that performance will be measured, having a timely and transparent M&V process, and incentive earning opportunities sufficient to motivate IOU performance. So over 2 years, utilities can receive almost $180 million. A big chunk, that gets their attention, right? So that's a big chunk of change. So there are different categories. If you just focus on improving codes and standards, they'll get $2 million a year. Non-resource programs like training, $3 million a year. Ex-ante scores based on their engineering estimates, 21. But the big one is this. Resource program savings, $63 million a year. That's where they go out and put in actual devices, right? Lighting, motors, air conditioners. And the savings are ex post as well as ex ante. And capped up to 9% of program expenditures. For that big column there, the resource savings, their custom projects, uncertainty, deemed savings, and the ex-ante deemed savings. The uncertainty is based on certain types of measures that they've identified. They're not sure of how much savings will come out of that, so they're focusing on that. I'll focus on, very quickly, again, a custom lighting impact evaluation. This is sort of a typical, what I wanted to provide an example of a typical evaluation that people are doing. And also, well, yeah, this is being done by Itron, a consulting company. They've identified, first, the objectives are estimate the first year life cycle net and gross savings value, perform ex post measurement, right, for the all custom lighting projects, and then apply a high level of rigor. Because there's always uncertainty. When you ever look at impacts and evaluate, there's always a confidence interval, and so they want to have a tight and rigorous confidence interval. The methodology, I'm not going to go into detail, but they look at what has been installed, what are the hours of operation before a retrofit, for example, putting in lighting, and what are the hours of operation afterwards to make sure there's there, or make adjustments. They also look at the wattage. What was the lighting before a retrofit? What was the lighting after the retrofit? So a lot of activities are going on to collect this data. For this study, they came up with these findings. The realization rate, they call them gross realization rate, or GRR. Basically, what this says, for megawatt hours, they were pretty good. They being, when they did the evaluation, about 80% of the savings that were estimated were actually achieved. You rarely get 100%. Sometimes you get above, but 80% is pretty good. And this is at a 90% confidence level. And across all the utilities, pretty good. I mentioned net savings because of free riders. Do we have free riders? Well, it turns out we do have free riders. This is after accounting for them, so the savings go down. It's about 50% now of what was anticipated, and this is mainly due to the free rider application. So there are a lot of people, particularly for this type of program, the lighting, they were going to do them. Take away. That's why the savings came down, and then you make adjustments over time. So, next steps in evaluation. Again, going through this very quickly, 3 key topics which I have been involved in and I think are you'll be hearing about, even if you're not in the energy field. Experimental design, we're interested in causality, right? There's still some, people are skeptical. So how do we know? So we have control and treatment groups, and we want to see what of those savings can be attributable to the program, right? So we have savings going up, and that little part is attributed to the program. Experimental design minimizes what we call threats to internal external validity. There's a list here. I'm not going to go through this, but this is your standard statistical handbook. What do we do about it? We try to do randomized control trials. It's the most rigorous approach. It's been conducted in many fields, public health, education, military, media. If we can't do that, then we have what we call quasi-experimental studies, where we have comparison groups. So we try, and this has not been done in California. Only recently are we trying to do this, to become more certain, to do more of this randomization. And then measurement and so on. This is probably a little too much detail here, but you can see we have 2 groups randomly split into 2 populations. One gets the program, what we call the intervention. The other is the control. And then some of the people are going to be reducing energy use in both, right? Because people are going to do it anyway. And some don't. So, but that's the difference. The difference is trying to get the energy use, energy savings occurring in that intervention group. but you leave the other group alone. There are a lot of barriers in conducting these experimental designs. They're both regulatory and institutional. And again, this is true wherever you're going to go, but a lot of people are not familiar with experimental design advantages. Their fear of customer, a utility says, we want to offer the program to everybody. Their fear if customers don't get the program, there'll be a backlash. They're risk averse. They're not sure where things are going to happen, whether the savings are going to occur or not, so they're not ready to put in money for this. And they're impatient. There's a desire for inexpensive studies that can be done quickly. So there are ways to overcome these barriers. Here's a list for regulators allowing experiments to occur, making sure they recognize they take time, and they should be rewarded, I think, for conducting these kinds of experiments. Program administrators, same sort of thing. They need to fund the people. They need the expertise to do this. And hopefully some of the students here might be involved later on in doing so. I'll skip this one and go to Sustainable Development Goals approved by the UN General Assembly in 2015, underpin the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. You'll hear about this just came in January 2016. Looks at poverty, all these different things. Poverty, climate action, affordable and clean energy, which is where energy efficiency is, zero hunger, good health, quality education, gender equality, clean water, etc. There are a lot, 17. It's just getting going. Evaluation will play a big role in this. As I mentioned, number 7, ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, modern energy. Energy efficiency is the key. It's the major international. So if you're interested in international studies, make sure you pay attention to this. This is going to be it for at least the next 15 years. It's not going away. People are going to be talking about it. Bodies are being formed. Money is going to be spent, and so on. It's essential to know if it works, though, and the money is well spent. Each country is going to come up with their own evaluation. There are challenges, as you can imagine, it's huge and it's complex with multiple actors in all these different fields with different objectives and programs. How do you get them to work together? The evaluation design will be very tricky. Many people don't believe it's possible to even evaluate these SDGs. Most agencies focus on results-based approaches with little attention to sustainability, right? Focus on sustainability. So if you're interested in sustainability, that's different than saying, how much am I going to get tomorrow? And they're difficult topics to evaluate, vulnerability, exclusion, and gender analysis. But they're unique opportunities. And again, I think if you're interested at the international level in sustainability, this will be a very exciting time. I mean, I would be doing this if I was a bit younger. So it opens a completely new world of evaluation and challenges. M&V, analytical tools. So basically, I'll go through this real quickly. We have utility meters that collect data, and it's sort of monthly. Now we have these smart meters that can collect on an hourly basis. We have new software tools that can analyze that. So people are thinking, well, let's use these new technologies. It's called M&V for Monitoring Verification 2.0 or Automated M&V. There are limitations. It cannot assess free ridership, as I mentioned, changes in baseline conditions, doing process evaluation. But it has a role to play. Bottom line, these tools enhance and support evaluation, but not replace it. And it's an infant. Again, if I was starting out, I'd be looking at this. I think there are a lot of opportunities, and it may be very beneficial. So last part is developing an evaluation community in Asia. As I mentioned, Asia, here's global energy efficiency investment. Rest of Asia this report just came out this year by the International Energy Agency. And you can see where investment's going on. China is going to exceed Europe. It already is exceeding U.S. and the rest of Asia. So So this is the area of the world, again, that I've been focusing on for the last 2 years. But there are challenges. I'm trying to do what I did in the U.S. and in Europe, developing an evaluation community in Asia. There are challenges and opportunities in the vision. The challenges is evaluation experience is very limited in most economies in Asia. There aren't initiatives that include evaluation like we have, say, in California. Action plans or policy only focus on the implementation, not the evaluation side. Funding of data collection and evaluation is often not available or low priority. Expertise, as you can imagine, is limited, and evaluation data are lacking or not standardized. But there are opportunities. These economies, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, China, they're all involved in developing and implementing new policies on energy efficiency. They're very excited about this. So there are opportunities to introduce evaluation early on as part of the process, to increase their expertise in governance, increase the body of knowledge, and improve energy efficiency policy program and design. So the vision is to support the strengthening of evaluation leadership and capacity, especially in developing countries, foster the cross-fertilization of evaluation theory and practice in Asia, and address international challenges. So since October 2015, we had a workshop in Beijing on evaluation, then in Chinese Taipei, in Korea, and just recently in the Philippines. The next event's occurring at the end of this year. We're having a workshop and then a conference. And the question is, can we develop a professional community in Asia? As a very famous person says, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. So that's why I and others have been trying to get involved with this organization, IEPPEC. You can look them up, look at the conference. Here's my contact information, so you can follow up with me. I think the slides become available later, so I know I went through it very quickly, and you can at least get my contact. If you have questions, this is the time for questions for today, but later we can do that as well.
So we'll be running